Well, God bless you one and all, and welcome back to the Bishop's Corner. I'll be your host tonight, and my name is Reverend Dr. Herbert Scott, the Chief Prelate of Liberty Hall, Cathedral of Praise, right here in the heart of Brooklyn. And certainly we do want to shout out to the man of God himself, Dr. Phil, who happens to be the visionary of the Bishop's Corner, and certainly he is doing a tremendous job. Well, we do have a great program once again for you tonight. Listen and be blessed. Before we should go into that, we just want to make sure that we acknowledge those that are with us tonight. I believe that it's his first time on the Bishop's Corner. We are so blessed and happy to have with us Steve Spiro tonight. And we are definitely waiting to listen the words that will be emanating from this great man. He's known as the Master Connector. And I'm going to ask him at this time just to weigh on in and tell us a little about himself from the book and what he has been doing, because I'm sure that something great is coming forth. Sir, it's in your hands. Thank you.
I appreciate that. It's an honor to be on with your program and with you fine folks. And thank you, Dr. Phil Breed, for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. So, so Steve Spiro, the Master Connector, coming at you live and direct. That's a kind of a signature. I have to say that, but and everything I've accomplished in my life, I give God all the honor, glory, and credit, because if it wasn't for him, none of this is possible. But so I was a Jew born in the Bronx. I was hardworking. My dad owned a liquor store as an entrepreneur. Dissuaded me from going into that. Wound up going into advertising, marketing. Went to high school for that. Went to college. Got out. Couldn't get a job. Started a company. Opened an advertising company, and had a very illustrious career. And also got a couple of black belts in the martial arts. Along the way, wound up marrying my high school sweetheart. She was born and raised Catholic. No God in her life. And what happened was, through a friend that I worked with in advertising, he introduced me to an extremely successful entrepreneur who was a true entrepreneur. He had multiple businesses in his late 20s and had incredible lifestyle. But the thing that intrigued me about him was, and I pursued him to eventually take me on his wing, and he became a mentor to me. And I looked into his eyes and there was no stress. And I just assumed, because the man's wealthy, he's got success, he's got time, he's got money. But it turns out he was a very strong Christian, and I wasn't even, being from the Bronx, a Jew from the Bronx. If you talk to me, if you talk to anyone like that about Jesus, it's like, talk to the hand, get away from me, okay? And so he didn't. And I think it was St. Francis Assisi said, I preach the gospel everywhere we go, and when necessarily use words. And he just lived his life, and he didn't really preach at me. But I started leaning in, and as we were building this business relationship and getting some mentorship from him, he started pouring into me and got me into books and audios and networking. In fact, he was the one who challenged me. He said, Steve, you need to meet 3 strangers every day. And you know, Bishop, you're from the New York area. If you talk to strangers, they're going to kidnap you or shoot you. But I did it. It got me out of my comfort zone, definitely stretched me. And I started building on a massive network, and over time, today I've got 19,000 contacts on my phone and 26,000 LinkedIn connections. I don't know if you're, a social media person like Instagram, and that's like zero, hardly any numbers. But in LinkedIn, it's definitely respectable. So I've created a pretty big brand. I've got a LinkedIn live broadcast. Dr. Phil we've been honored to have him on our show a few times. But along the way, as I've grown and really changed and adapted, and I finally, at a business conference, there was a Sunday morning service, an optional service, and I gave my heart to the Lord. My wife was with me on that trip, and we both came forward to accept the Lord, and it's been an amazing journey. And through that process, we've had a lot of self-development, a lot of self-growth through these books and audios, and obviously now into the Bible, and go to church. We're talking off camera, church weekly, and so it's been a blessing. But, so the book was something that was inspired by videos that I was producing. I was doing a video every week called Fired Up Friday, Master Connector Tips, and just mindset stuff, about 2 to 3 minutes, just thoughts, from my head, things that I've been learning, or something that experiences that I had, stories that I've experienced or have been told or learned. And it created somebody actually helped me, and they basically watched the videos and wrote it out, and we put a book together, and it's been incredible blessing. And it's interesting. And if you could see the word, the Tao, it's not a religion. It's not, for me, it's not a religion. Tao means the way, the path. So the premise of the book is it's the way of the master connector. And as you can see in the subtext, it's the way an introvert became a master connector. And that was me. I was shy, introverted, picked on, bullied, learning disabled, dyslexic, a lot of crazy insecurities and inadequacies. And I've been able to get through that. And so it's a little bit about the book. I think it's a labor of love. I dedicate the book to my Heavenly Father, because again, I want to give him all the glory. So that's the story. It's available through Amazon Kindle and Barnes & Noble online, and eventually it will be in the next week or so, God willing, it'll be out in Audible form as well. And Dr. Phil promised me he's going to get the Audible book when it comes out. So I'm going to hold him to his feet to the fire on that one. So, but that's a long story to a short question, Bishop. So, but that's a little bit about me and a little bit about the book.
Well, listen, Steve, thank you very, very much. Well said indeed. The Way of the Master Connector. Looking forward to taking a good look at that book, young man. And I'll definitely tell you how I feel about it. You have my word on that. Okay? Well, we are so thanking God for the rest of the panel. We are blessed tonight in having the one and only Dr. Philip Reed himself. He'll be weighing in, and thank you very much, young man, for humbling yourself and coming on the Bishop's Corner. Okay, last but not least, we are blessed to have once again Minister Tanya Wagner. Woman of God, certainly it is indeed a blessing to have you one more time on the Bishop's Corner. And certainly tonight, let me say this, that we have a great program. Episode number 1, Grateful Communication, the power of tones, body language, and word placement. So we should have a grand time tonight. We are speaking about communication, how to communicate, when to communicate, the different ways of communicating, not just that, but using your hands and everything else and so forth. So I'm expecting something great tonight. I do know that others will be weighing in, but listen, time is of the essence, and we must indeed begin. Question number 1. How do the tones we use in communication affect the way our messages are received and interpreted by others? Does our tone have something to do with the message that we are trying to get over to that individual? Let's hear first of all from Minister Tanya Wagner. Woman of God, how say you?
Good night to everyone on the panel. Good night, Bishop. I think tone is really important, right? When you think about sound can do a lot. We know that sound can be comforting, it can be healing, it can be encouraging. Oftentimes sound too, when you pick up sound, it can also kind of relay that someone may be troubled, may be irritated, may be angry, may be enraged. And I think tone is really important when you're communicating with people, because one of the things that I've learned is when you want to communicate effectively, you really have to think about what is it that I want the other person to really know and to understand. And there's a sound that can communicate that, right? If I say, welcome, Thanksgiving is around the corner, a lot of people celebrate it. And if I'm yelling at you, you're welcome to my like, is this really a welcome? Because this is seeming like a bashing. That may be an extreme example, but in essence, what I'm getting at is oftentimes when we're communicating, if we're not paying attention to our tone, how we sound and how we're giving off information, we may think that we may be warm, greeting, that we're inviting someone, but in actuality, that's not necessarily what they're receiving. And I also believe that sound and the way in which we communicate with sound is a cultural thing. So I think when you want to communicate with people, it's also really helpful to know the background of those people, to know where they come from, just know more about the person that you're talking to. If I'm speaking with someone who's an elder, as a therapist, I have to talk with a lot of people, and I'm cautious to make sure that I use Mrs. and Mr. I'm not going to call you my dad because you're not my dad, right? So somebody might view those things as disrespectful. Also, my tone, having a sense of humility in my voice and things can cause that person on the other end to receive me a little bit more. So I think tone is really important when you're communicating with people, and if you want to communicate really in a healthy way.
So then, Tanya, would you concur with me then that your tone clarifies and conveys meanings?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I know we have the master connector, so I'm looking forward to learning a lot from him tonight as well, because again, and we're going to go over quite a few scriptures, but I've heard it said before that when you go to communicate with people, you really have to think about what is it that you're trying to convey to them. And if we spend time thinking about that before, I think we would choose our words more carefully. I think we would also spend time saying, if I do it this way, am I going to get out of it what I want? Is that person really going to receive? If I want to show you that I really care, but everything that I'm conveying with my tone, my body language is saying that I'm angry, do I really think that you picked up that I care? Maybe not, So absolutely, I do think tone can convey messaging, and even down to written words. Written words in the office culture, when people use all caps and things, it's like you're yelling at somebody, So they, even in this day and age, we say the tone of a text. So even written words have a sound. Even written words have a sound.
Well, thank you very much, young lady. And I just love the scripture that Dr. Phil put down there from Solomon in all of his splendor. He said that a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And that is so true. Before we should hear from the master connector, I'm going to use him for the last. We're going to hear from Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil, how say you? How do the tones we use in communication affect the way our messages are received and interpreted by others?
Yes, Bishop, thank you so much for that question. And I'm honored to be on this platform, even though I'm helping to produce it, but I'm very much honored to be in the room with such great people. So, when you talk about tone, people don't hear what you say outside of the tone that you say it. So they go by how it feels. Like when you say, I love you, or I love you, right? It's not the words themselves. It's how the tone of those words and how they make you feel, right? And so, to be sensitive to how things come out of your mouth, it can be affected by a lot of different things. Like, for instance, I know somebody who has a hearing problem, right? And so they don't hear so well in one ear. So when they talk to you loud, and they're not sure about the tone that they're using, right? Because their inner ear is distorted. So they're talking as if you are in the back of the room and you're thinking, wow, this person is the person that, like, I've seen when they just meet somebody for the first time and they're talking and they think that they are getting what they mean across, but the other person is either offended or they're like, who's this person? Why are they attacking me? Right? And it causes a lot of strife for this person because meeting them up front, you don't know they have a hearing problem. And And this is why communication is important, is in the sense of, you know, even if you don't understand why somebody's doing something, say to them, you know, I really don't understand why you're talking to me so loudly, right? What's the do you have a problem with me? Rather than just kind of like swiftly getting into an argument. And because you know, when you have you ever seen two people talking and it swiftly becomes this heated discussion, and you're going, wait, I don't think that's what this person means, but the emotions have already gotten involved because the tone came across to that person as, you are attacking me, so I'm going to attack you back, right? And that's why tone and body language is so important in communication, because sometimes it's smaller than you think. It's not as big as you think. But I'm going to save some for the Master Connector as well.
Then, Dr. Phil, and this is throwing this out to everyone. Then you suggest then that tone should be friendly, professional, and sincere. How say you?
Yes. I believe that if you have to get your message in your mind and in your heart across, and it can only come across in two things, which is your words and your actions, right? People are listening and they're watching for both, mostly watching than listening, because I would say about 70 to 80% of people really don't know how to listen. They know how to hear, but they don't know how to listen. They listen or they hear based on their emotional state. So if you're talking to somebody and their filter is already filled with anger and frustration, and you are coming, no matter how you come across, Bishop, you could come across as calm and, you know, I was just thinking about you today. Why are you thinking about me? Right? The filter is just not there, you know? So again, you can come across professional, you can come across as, you know, being sensitive sometimes, but if the filter of the other person is filled with other things, you know, like they just got in an argument with their wife, right? But they can't yell at their wife. So you came in just in time to be unleashed on, you know, and so you get the brunt of the frustration, you know, versus or misdirected frustration. And so, you know, you gotta, if you're in that mindset and if you're in that filter, while somebody is even just trying to be professional, trying to be kind, you know, be sensitive to your current state of emotion, and know that if you're carrying frustration from a previous conversation or from a previous experience, that you may be transferring those emotions and feelings to the person that's in front of you. You know, I think awareness, consciousness and awareness of where we are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually helps us to communicate how we feel more accurately.
Okay, well said indeed, young man. Thank you very much. Okay, well, now it's time to hear from the Master Connector himself. And sir, I am like a well, trying to receive all the water that I can. So please don't just fill my cup, but fill my
big expectations. Well, listen, the hardest part about doing this is you guys being last, because now everyone said all incredible things. So now I have to come up with something that's going to be engaging, but you guys stole all the good stuff. No, it's a fantastic job, everyone. But, you know, so interestingly enough, right, being a big networker, I chose the title Master Connector because I felt like it's a lot more relevant to be able to connect with people versus just networking with people. And true communication to me is about connecting. And, you know, I get throw so many things out here, but one thing I want to just reflect on is what Dr. Phil was speaking about. What's interesting how why I enjoy communicating, connecting with Dr. Phil is he's always smiling. And so he could say anything, but with that smile, it comes across really well. So it's important. Yep, the big thumbs up for that. But one thing I want to speak about, several things here, but one thing is I learned years back when we're communicating, there's not just tone, but there's tone, tempo, and volume when we speak. And I heard about this technique called mirroring and matching. And what, again, if you want to connect with somebody and, and really have them feel like you're with them, not just speaking at them, but you're really connecting with them. If you could really, match their tone and tempo and volume. In other words, if they're on the soft-spoken side, lower your tone down. If they're speaking a little fast, speak a little fast, right? If they're, the volume part, right? We talked about, right? If somebody is a little bit on the loud side, maybe it's because they have hearing challenges, or perhaps it's just the style in which they like to communicate. So if you could match, they feel like, let's be honest, even though we're in a world of inclusion and diversity, there is always a human nature to want to be around people that we relate to. And so whatever we could do in our communication style, if we can make it relatable to them, they feel better connected. They don't feel disconnected. So those are some things. There's also one other thing I want to reflect on. I don't know if it was you, Bishop, or Dr. Phil said it, or maybe Pastor Tanya, but somebody mentioned about the things, how you say and the way you come across. I'm reading a book, re-listening to a book. I'm an Audible guy because I'm dyslexic, so reading is hard for me. But the book is called Captivate, and it's by a lady named Vanessa Van somebody. I'll get it for you in a moment. My screen is too big, so her last part of her name is cut off. But it's The Science of Succeeding with People. And she's speaking about it, the part that I'm on in the book, about micro expressions. I know we're going to talk about body language in a moment. But she was saying, I'm going to say to you, I love you. I think, Phil, you might have said this. She put a micro expression on her face of disgust. And when she said, I love you, versus when she had sort of this excited expression on her face, micro expression, it came across very different in the way she spoke those exact same words. So how your face, again, we were talking about smiling before, can affect your tone and potentially tempo and volume. So you have control of that. It's something that you can manufacture through your physicality, not just through what you're speaking, but also kind of how, and because if you're not showing it in your face, there's no continuity. And people don't feel like you're being authentic, and people want to connect with people because they know you're being authentic, right? One of my 4 pillars that I speak about is one of them is connecting authentically. The other one is being others focused, being a go-giver. We were speaking about something about people feeling like they feel that you care, right? I've heard it said, people don't know, they're not concerned about how much you know, they want to know you care, right? I believe it might have been Zig Ziglar who said that years back, but that's so true. So, being others focused, being a go-giver, being able to help others, which is of course part of the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you have them to do unto you, right? And then being grit to overcome obstacles, and being, building a community, growing connections are the other 2 pillars. But the 2 first pillars I spoke about, I think very much relate to this topic that we're speaking about today. So that is my 2 cents, and I'll pass it back to you, Bishop.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. But let me put a question to you, and also, to the panel. What can we do then to improve our tone? What can we do then to improve our tone?
That question for me again?
You and the panel. Sure.
Okay. Well, I never liked the awkward silence, so no one was speaking, so I'll speak up here. I think when you think about the tone, you should think about who you're connecting with. And I want to also, this is another piece I wanted to speak about. When I was sharing, I was talking about if you're having a one-on-one conversation. But there's also times like right now we're a panel of 4 speaking to an organization, right? To a group of people. I know you folks are pastors. You're speaking often in front of a large congregation, right? And we could use the tone in different ways also when we're speaking to make a point. And we also could use it to get people to listen better. I've often heard it said and I've seen it demonstrated when somebody is giving a talk, they on purpose get very soft. And then people kind of lean in and they want to listen, right? Or, if you see people are kind of maybe falling asleep a little bit, you get a little loud and a little, animated, right? And, there's different ways that, you can show your animation. And you can, by bringing your tempo up, you can show your passion and your excitement, and people buy into that. So there's different ways you can do it. But I think it's knowing who you're speaking to and understanding what they relate to is how you can affect your tone better. I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's my take on the question.
Okay, before we should hear from the others, I think that Frank Coppola is in. Can we bring him in, Phil? Okay, welcome, Frank. It's been quite some time. Good to see you indeed, young man. I think you're muted. You can unmute.
I'm gonna get unmuted. There we go.
Okay, thank you very
It's
much.
been a while.
night.
Well,
It
Hi,
has. Please go ahead.
it's interesting, what you were just talking about. What occurred to me is you're modulating your talk to somebody, and depending on who it is, if it's a group, if it's a one-on-one, at the same time, given what Steve said, within that you have to be authentic at the same time, so that you're not almost pretending to be a particular kind of person, as opposed to being sincere when you're talking to somebody. And it could be that you could be talking very low, or it could be that you could be talking very loud. But the sincerity, I think, is incredibly important.
I say amen to that also, definitely.
Amen.
Anyone else like to weigh in on the question? The question is, what can you do to improve your tone?
Say again?
Okay.
What can you do to improve your tone?
One of the
So-
things I was gonna say, oh, sorry, Dr. Phil.
No, go ahead, Tanya.
Okay, I'm gonna be brief. One of the things that came to me as we were talking was, as well as Steve said, I think he summed up of some really great points. One of the things is the audience for me. The other thing that I think we need to consider is the climate. The climate of a place. There's some stuff that are happening in different places at different times. Some communities, I mean, there's so much going on all over the world right now. And even when I think of how we preach the gospel, thinking about that, there's different strategies and techniques and how we want to convey information to people about Jesus. And I do think that we have to be mindful about where we're going. It's not only the audience, but what is happening in those spaces. What's the culture of those places? Because, the last thing I want to do, you just think about it. What is it that I really want to achieve? And if I'm at a funeral, it might not be the appropriate time for me to be yelling down the house there. You know what I'm saying? The climate of that may be a bit somber. People are grieving, they're in mourning. I may have a message that needs to be preached, or even a word that maybe God would use me to speak to somebody, but the way in which that word is delivered could push that person away, or it could draw them closer. So I think the audience is important, but I think if you care about your audience, that's the thing, right? Because we can know that there's an audience, and I think Mr. Frank was just saying this, authenticity. I believe when you care about the audience, you will go one step further to find out more about who the audience is and how can you effectively make that connection with the audience to convey what you feel they may need. And I think even in the body of Christ, that's something that we think about. How do we convey our words? What's the tone? Me talking to somebody one-on-one may look like different from me talking to a group of believers. My tone may be different for someone that is a new believer as compared to someone who has been in the faith for a very long time and has certain amounts of knowledge and information. So I think it's something that we really should not overlook. And to be honest, I'm sure, Steve, you can attest to this. I believe it seems to me like a lifelong work. It seems like you constantly, pressing yourself to get better in this area and care about the audience to the point that you will, you're willing to become a little bit more effective in your communication as you keep growing. So that's what I would say. I think the audience and also paying attention to the climate, the environment, and what's happening in those areas.
I just want to chime in and just say your heart, right? What's your heart posture? And if your heart is right, right, that's and you're true to your heart, obviously, no matter how your tone, your tempo it's all there, right? My heart is to be the light, is to uplift, inspire, and encourage. And if that means I have to animate a little bit, I don't think that's making me any less authentic. I think it just means that I'm using the tools that I have at my disposal to be able to inspire people to believe in themselves more and to know they can accomplish amazing things because they're sons and daughters of a king, and we're, God don't make junk, right? And they should believe in themselves. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Hey, Dr.
That was more than 2 cents. Go ahead, Bishop.
No, I was saying that you were about to say something before 10.
Yeah, this is such a rich. I like how this conversation is just developing, because especially if you're speaking to a group of people, it's a skill. Homiletics, right? There's a reason you go to school to learn how to bring forth a message, because it's not just going up there and throwing out a bunch of words. It's a skill, it's an art, right? Because you speak, the bigger the group of people you're speaking in front of, is the more articulate and specific you have to be in your goal and your purpose of why am I saying what I said, right? And how is this going to come across to this audience of 3,000 people, right? If you're speaking to 3,000 people, and let's say, 1,000 of them are Jewish and Orthodox, another 1,000 is Buddhist and from Asia, and then you have the American 1,000. You can't just generalize your context for one specific group, because somebody's going to leave offended. You might leave and find your car scratched because you just generalized everything and didn't think about, what could be culturally interpreted a certain way. And, sometimes we think, well, if you cannot have the attitude of, I really don't care how they feel. Because when you personally have your feelings hurt, it means something.
Mhm.
So to purposely engage an audience or a person to cause conflict and hurt their feelings, it does matter.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it done to you. You don't want to walk in a room and somebody, let's say if you're African American or a Black person, you don't want somebody walking in the room and they're using racial terminology to describe you. You're going to get offended. So why walk in a room and do that to anybody else? Consider yourself when you're speaking with other people.
Mhm.
And if something offends a person, respect that.
Sure.
That's the other thing too, is the value you place, it's the value you place on the people that you're speaking to,
Yeah.
right? I value how you feel, Frank. I value what you think about what I said,
Mhm.
right? And like the master connector said, the point is to connect, is to communicate, is to be clear in how I feel in what I said, not
Right.
just what I said.
Can I add something to that, if you don't mind?
Please.
I think that one of the things that's most fascinating, if you're speaking to a large group of people, and I'll never forget it. I went to see Frank Sinatra. Not a big fan, but Diane wanted to go. So I went to see Frank Sinatra at the Garden, at the Madison Square Garden. It was packed. It was 20,000 people. Got into the boxing ring, you could hear a pin drop. Something about leadership makes a huge difference. Now that he's an icon, but I really think that really plays into your ability to communicate, that you show up as a compassionate leader, for lack of a better term. I know one of the things that I do, and I do it all the time because I have a tendency to kind of go off in different directions at various times. I'll ask people that I'm speaking, and I'll say to them, are you following me? I mean, are you getting this? Am I saying something that you don't understand? Because just let me know, because sometimes I talk fast, sometimes I talk slow. It'd be great. No, you're good. Okay, good. So let's continue. That interplay makes a world of difference when you're talking to somebody, because they feel like I've taken the time to ask them how they're doing. And I think that really plays a part. And it's like, so what are you talking to 3,000 people, or whether you're talking to, your daughter? It's the same thing, I think.
Well,
My
let me-
favorite speakers slash authors is a gentleman named John C. Maxwell, former pastor, by the way.
Mhm.
And he speaks about leadership a lot. And he says, how do you spell leadership? It's EXAMPLE, example, right?
Mhm.
But he has one of his books, which is one of my favorites, and one of my mentors highly encouraged me to read it, listen to it a few times. And Phil, you appreciate this because we were talking about it, right? Everyone communicates, few connect. That's the name of the topic of the book, right? So we all communicate, but it's not communicate, it's connect, right? And the
Yeah.
subtext is what the most effective people do differently. So great book to check, to sink your teeth into if you have a chance.
Would you
But
say that
great. The title is Everyone Communicates, Few Connect by John C. Maxwell. Yeah, but great points, Frank.
He's a great writer. I've got several books on him. Let me ask you guys a question then. Can a person be somewhat hypocritical in their speech? They say one thing and they seem to be getting it over to the audience, but in their heart, they mean something else. How say you?
I'll grab that one. I'll just
Go
say
ahead.
this. I'll say this. People are not stupid, and they see through that, right? And you could fool people a little bit, but ultimately you don't fool them. So I feel like out of the, it's a scripture, right? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? And I'm not great at quoting exactly where in the Bible it comes from, but I know it's in the Bible. But yeah, it's definitely, it's going to come across, and it might come across in there, as we were talking before, the micro expressions, but people will sense that there's something off. And quite frankly, for years, I was in a very dark place for many years. And the big challenge, and my mentor said this for a very long time. He said, Steve, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something about you, because, I really was open to change, and I couldn't get people to connect with me. And part of it was because I was so you know, I was saying all the right things on the outside, but my heart was broken and I needed to heal. And I was so broken that I was protecting myself. I was shielding myself, and I wasn't, because I had this broken heart. I didn't want people to be, to see my heart, see it was broken, see that I was wounded. And that's why nowadays when I speak from vulnerability. Frank, you talked about authenticity. I'll tell people about some of the challenges I've dealt with over the years, because I feel like it helps break barriers down, and people then can relate to you better and they can connect with you better. So, but if you're not, again, to me, it's about that heart. Again, we talked about the heart posture. If your heart isn't right, it's going to come across ugly, and people are not going to really connect with your message. You might be speaking, but it's just like Mrs. Carbopple from Charlie Brown, on the phone. Wah, 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 wah. That's all they're hearing. They're not hearing the message,
Okay, anyone else like to chime in on that?
Yeah, Bishop, what I would love to say about that is the moment you realize somebody's not sincere, trust is gone, right? Credibility is gone. And the moment you lose that, that person may never listen to you ever again. Because every time they think about you, they're like, this person isn't genuine. And I know all of us have done that. Like the moment especially when it comes to salespeople, like the moment you realize that this person is not being authentic, it almost like in yourself, it just turns you off from the entire conversation. And there's a wall that comes up, and you just don't want to hear what they have to say. It's just like if somebody lies to you. I mean, yeah, everything they say may be accurate, but it's just not sincere. And just the fact it's not sincere, it feels like they lied to you, because there was a lack in sincerity. So the meaning behind your words, people sense it. That's why I was saying, people don't hear what you say verbatim. They feel what you say. Is like, you ever walk away from somebody, you go, man, I mean, he said all the right things, but I didn't like how it made me feel, right? And you tend not to do, you tend not to do business. You tend not to get into relationships with people that make you feel off. I don't know about you guys, but that's for me. I'm a very sensory person. So you could say all the right things, but if I walk away and in my heart, and I walk away, my heart's like, I don't know. That's it. I just don't do it.
Politicians. Let's not even go there. Let me ask this question. Does attitude play an important part in communication? Attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. I think attitude is big. And I think attitude is kind of made up of a few things that we've been talking about tonight. Your tone of voice, your body language, how you come off to people physically from a physical place. Thinking about, again, what type of personality do you have? Is it pleasant? Is it kind? I do think there's times in life where, just being honest, I don't know if every conversation is a pleasant one. We all, it's not peaches and rainbows every time you're going to talk with someone. I've had to tell my son to be careful when we're crossing the street. He's 4 years old. My voice is a little bit more firm because I'm trying to convey to him that there's danger present. And so those things are important, but I think it's different if I call him a name, right? If I yell at him, if I, as Dr. Phil was saying, right, the types of words that I use to correct him, can make or break that conversation. Instead of warning him, he could leave with from that conversation, from that correction, just feeling feeling disheartened, because of the word choice that I use or how I come across to him. So I think attitude is actually really important. And oftentimes I think, there used to be a saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself. It's an old saying, and I think we need to check ourselves. That's why even, I don't know if we're going to get there tonight, but I'm sure Steve, with your, just with your knowledge, even when you think about attitude, like sometimes if I know that I'm not in a good space or something, I might even choose not to communicate with someone at that time, because I know that you're going to get something that you probably don't deserve. I might have had a bad day. I might have didn't like the call I got, or maybe the traffic was really bad. Sometimes it's just small. And so you want to just process through that before you start trying to connect, right, with other people, because they may be getting something that they have no right to receive, right? So I think attitude is very important. And oftentimes I think that's what we don't see. We communicate with people and we don't know why they didn't receive it, but we're not seeing that we were giving something else off at the time of that communication as well. It wasn't just about our words. They were feeling something from us. They were hearing something from us. Our eyes might have changed. The facial structure might have changed. Even our body positioning may have changed, right? So I think our attitude is really important.
But you dropped my name, so I'll throw out. By the way, I think that's a lyric of a song, if I'm not mistaken. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Going old school on me here. But yeah, I mean, I heard it said, your attitude determines your altitude, right? And attitude is the decision. My mentor would say to me, you wake up. You could wake up in the morning and you could, hey, man, I can't believe it's another day, or man, I'm excited it's another day, right? You make a decision on how you want to feel. You feel your way into action, and you don't act your way into conviction. You gotta feel it first, and then it's that cycle, right? But one thing I wanted to also add is you could be, when you come into a room with your attitude, you could either be a thermometer or a thermostat.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and I like to be that thermostat whenever I can and help to set the temperature of the room versus just reflect about the temperature of the room. So you could bring that positive attitude and kind of at least neutralize it, because maybe it's negative, but you can neutralize it and maybe bring it towards that positive side. But again, if you're not that, it's going to be hard for you to bring that, right? So you got to be positive and be good energy. Be optimistic, and then bring that, and hopefully be that thermostat and change the temperature in that room.
Beautiful, well said indeed. Anyone else like to chime in before we should go forth? Anyone else? Okay.
I'd like to just like to make one statement. I write music. I write singer-songwriter, and depending on the subject, I'm constantly trying to get the mood of what I'm attempting to project.
Yes.
And if I am not in a good place, one or two things happen. I'll say, you know what? This is an opportunity to work through that, through the music, or not a good day to be doing this, because it'll get translated to other people. And that's not what I want to be doing.
Mhm.
So it comes in a lot of different forms. I look at Philip. Philip is a brilliant graphic designer. And when I met him, he was doing something completely different. Okay, completely different. So when he got into this, I just saw this immediate change. And I'll ask you, Philip, if you're not in a good space, can you design something for somebody?
It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard because my mind is not my heart is not in it. So
Yeah.
it's hard to focus. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bishop. That's all. I wanted to
Okay.
say.
There's one question that I do have to put to the panel is this. How does one improve communication? How do you improve it?
Repeat that question, Bishop.
How does one improve communication? How do you improve it? Sometimes is it important sometimes to listen to yourself? Because sometimes we speak, but it's like we are not hearing ourselves. Have you ever spoken something and it's important sometimes to tape yourself? Because some people are talking so loud, some people are dominating the conversation, and some people's attitude, pardon the expression, stinks. I'm saying that in a nice way because I've got to watch my tone. And so is there any way that we can improve on our tonal communication?
I'll say this, and you stole my thunder. The first thing I was going to say was, I think I heard you say it, is you could tape yourself. You can record yourself.
Record yourself, yes.
Yeah, you could record yourself and listen to yourself, because sometimes the perception of what we think we were saying or how we're communicating is not exactly what it really came across. And when you really listen to yourself, I mean, the best athletes in the world, they watch film, and as communicators, do we watch film? Not just listen, but watch, right? Watch video record ourselves. Though that's a very important thing we could do. The other thing I will say is it's what are you putting in? Because the old computer expression, garbage in, garbage out. I think it was Gigo, right? Are you putting in the good stuff, whether it be scripture, whether it be, positive messages, whether it be just those things, so that, again, you're filling your cup to overflow, right? So now you have, when you are asked to speak, maybe you're not asked to, I didn't know what I was going to say today, but I'm constantly putting good things in so that I always have something that I could share that's a positive, uplifting message. So putting good things in is also important. And the last thing I'll throw out to you is there's certain things you could kind of write for yourself. And what I mean by that, and you can't script out your whole entire life. I don't mean that, but I've gotten really good at what I call face-to-face meetings, networking meetings, when I am, have a 30-minute conversation with somebody, whether it be over Zoom or over coffee. I took some time to script out my story, and it was very thoughtful, and I left in things that I felt would be relatable, that would provide maybe some credibility, some relatability. And I took out things that were just filler, that didn't make any sense. It wasn't helping anybody. And I've been very purposeful about that. So I think also writing out and crafting some of your messaging is also an important factor as well. And last thing I'll throw out is this. Practice, especially if you're on a video camera, practice, if you can, looking as if you're looking at the person who's watching in their eyes. Right now, I'm doing that on purpose, looking at the camera. Can't say I'm always great at that, but I'm trying to look somewhere near the camera so that people feel that you're communicating to them and not distracted. If you have a camera that's off to the side, from a technical standpoint, I understand, but it may not be the best thing from a communication standpoint. So those are some things that come off the top of my head in terms of improving your communication.
Anyone else? If not,
yes, Bishop. One thing I have to say about that is you have to see the value in communication. You have to see the value of, why should I be better at this, right? And one thing I told my son, I said, the two things you have to master is people and money. Okay. If you don't know how to build relationships and communicate with people, you won't succeed in 90% of the things you try to do, because everything involves another person. If you want to build a house, you have to communicate with another person. If you want to write a letter, you may have to communicate with another person. Everything you have to do in life involves people and money. If you want to buy a car, you can't go empty-handed. You have to know how to talk to people, and no matter what situation you're in. And communication is key to life. just learning how to connect with people will improve yourself and your life, because it's two things. You have to be self-aware as well as be aware of your surroundings. You have to be aware of yourself and your surroundings in order to effectively communicate.
Mhm.
Right? Like, all right, I'll give an example. I was doing some work, talking about work, right? And I put everything into when I build something or create something. And I spent all night creating this video. I mean, I did one set and I went back and I said, I'm not happy with it. And I did another set. And when I woke up that morning, I didn't like some of the things in the last set. So I did some other alterations to it. So I spent maybe about 5 hours
Wow.
editing and re-editing this video, right? Now I present this thing to, because the person that asked me about it showed a sense of urgency. So I said, man, I was up all night and I worked on this. And, it seemed as it was very close to what you're looking for. I added a few things, really worked on it. And the attitude that I received was, oh, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. We can't use it. And we're not going to use it. Now, for a guy who lost sleep and was thinking about it, not just from a personal level, but from a professional level, right? You're putting your time in and you're doing this thing as a favor, right? Because you're like, oh man, I just want to do the right thing and give my best work. And then the response was, right? What's the emotion, the non-consideration of the kind of like work that goes behind it? It makes you kind of like not want to do it anymore.
Sure.
And that's what I'm saying, even with communicate, right? It's like you preparing a message, Bishop. You spent all night putting study in and, studying the Greek and the Hebrew and taking out all your books. And you go to preach and somebody goes, it was an all right message. What do you mean? Yeah.
I'd like to dovetail on that. What I found, because I do a lot of selling, and if I'm on the phone with somebody and I'm in a conversation with them, and it's important that I get across what I want to say and also listen to what they have to say. If the conversation takes a left turn and I can tell they're no longer in the conversation, I realize I put my attention on me, my ego. Am I doing it right? And what I have to do is, you know what? This is about them. Put your attention on them. And when you do that, things change. Things change. That's
Absolutely.
terrible what happened to you. Who is that?
No.
Hit him in the back.
No, my point is the sensitivity of, like paying attention to when somebody is excited about something and that you see that they've put a lot into it. Mm-hmm. You have to recognize that where that's coming from, right? Even if it's not something that you want, say, well, man, listen, I respect that you did so much work. I'm so glad, this is beautiful, love it, but I really wouldn't be able to use this today, right? Mm-hmm. I respect what you did. I acknowledge that you put a lot of work in, but it's not something I would, that's acknowledging, wow, you did a lot of great work. But to just, to have the attitude of, it doesn't mean anything. is taking value away from that person's time and talent.
Yeah.
And so, right. And so now it's become a totally different issue. That's how communication can be such a powerful thing in just your body language and your attitude of, oh yeah, I know you put a lot of time in. I know you meant well, but
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. Okay, let's hear from Tanya.
All
You got
right.
something to say, I'm sure.
Well, one of the things I was going to say is I think that's where we also start getting into the complexities of communication, because it's not as simple. I know that Frank is here. He studied this for a long time. As a therapist, one of the things that I find with communicating, and I do help people with this, especially marital people who are married. And oftentimes people have to really be trained on how to communicate effectively. And some of the things that I go over with my clients is just to practice active listening. That's learning, picking up on basic attending skills. I'll have people use a notepad or something, and I'll say, you know, as your spouse is speaking, I want you to just jot down the things that they're saying. I want you to try to pull out some of the things that may seem really important to them. And I'll maybe guide the communicator to communicate in such a way that you know, they've conveyed their point, that they haven't blamed or shamed that person, all of that. And it takes time, you know, so people have to learn. I think to communicate effectively, it's about the audience, about the tone, it's all of those things. But I think what you were just picking up on, Dr. Phil, was just some emotional intelligence pieces that I could be communicating all day and in a really nice tone. But if I'm like, yeah, okay, I still didn't need that, I don't need that anymore. I mean, I'm not picking up on what? I'm not empathizing, right? I'm not empathizing with the fact that you took your time to put this together. And if I don't have need for it anymore, the least I can do is just acknowledge that you followed through and did what was asked of you, right? So
Sure.
I think when we talk about communication, it's the effectiveness, and that's where some of the skills need to come out. So one of the things is acknowledgement, people learning how to reflect back to one another what was said. I think Frank said that earlier, you know, what are you getting from me? People have their thing. I ask people so that it doesn't seem condescending. Like sometimes if you say to somebody, tell me what I just said. Can you tell me what I said? Right? It comes off as condescending, right? But if I say, can you tell me like 2 or 3 points maybe that you might have pulled out from what I said? Now that's genuine for me, right? I talk with my hands. So when I'm being myself, someone is able to receive that because that's Tanya. Someone else is going to say that in a different way. But for me, I might stop with a client. I might say, can you just tell me 1 or 2 items that you're picking out so far from this conversation? I just
Right.
want to make sure that we're together on this. And
Right.
when they reflect back to me what they heard, I'm like, okay, we're on the same page. Also, if I hear something that I did not want to convey, then I know that I need to slow down because I've gone here and they're over here, and we're not going to get what needs to be accomplished to be done. So I think we also need some emotional intelligence skills, and that goes back to checking ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, do you know how to empathize with people? Are you able to be empathic, sympathetic? Do you take accountability? You know, do you know how to reflect back to people the things that they're communicating? And can you acknowledge how people feel? Can you
Yep.
acknowledge? That's something that I think a lot of times gets missed in people communicating as well. So
Yeah.
I think those are some of the skills that I'm used to kind of using sometimes in the mental health space, and those do help from time to time.
Sure.
Well said indeed,
Well
young
said.
lady. Now, unfortunately, we spent over an hour on question number 1. Okay, so
That's good.
I would like to at least jump on question number 2, seeing that we only have 23 minutes left. Okay, let's jump on question number 2. Now, question number 2 is, what role does body language play in conveying messages and emotions in our interaction, and how can we use it more effectively to communicate grace? Now, let's hear first of all from Steve himself, the master connector. So we are talking about body language?
Absolutely. Well, I was touching on some of this before, right? And I've heard it said that on the mirror matching piece, if you're sitting across from somebody, it again, just like tone, tempo, and volume, you can also do that with your body. So, and then you don't want to be very obvious, but if the person crosses their arms, you cross your arms. If they cross their legs, you cross their legs, you cross your legs, right? Again, don't be obvious, but it's a subtle thing. Again, people will feel like there's something there's something subtle there that they feel like you're connecting with them somehow. Okay. The other piece of it is touch. And we're in a world, you got to be careful, right? But how you shake their hand. Again, I'm reading this book and I'm hearing about when you shake someone's hand, the straight shake is better, because if you do this, you feel like you're dominating. If you this, you're saying, hey, I want you to dominate me. So there's certain subtleties when you're shaking someone's hand and looking them in the eye as you're shaking their hand. Gentle, I've heard also, shaking their hand and then putting your other hand on their elbow, just as a nice subtle gesture, right? There's just different things you could do, right? If somebody is feeling, you're seeing they're getting emotional, maybe, again, you got to be careful in the scenario and the environment, but perhaps putting a hand on their shoulder, gentle touch, right? There's different ways that we could show our emotions and our empathy through the way in which we use our body language. And I think touch is important. Again, got to be appropriate, different scenarios, right? But I believe that there's real value in that. So this is the first thing that comes to the top of my head. I'm curious to hear what everyone else has to say. Maybe I'll be able to come back and do a second round later.
Okay, so in other words, Steve, what you're saying is, well, the question is this: does body language assist us in understanding and decoding what a person is saying? Does it assist us, body language, in understanding and decoding what a person is saying?
Yeah, I think so, because if someone is speaking and you can kind of see where they're tensed up, there's some sort of barrier between you and the person that's speaking. So that seeing that has an effect on me. And I would never say to somebody, are you okay? But you can sense that when someone, I can use that as far as when someone's nervous. You can also see it when somebody's happy. And when someone's happy, there's a different level of communication. By the way,
I
Steve,
heard it said,
points.
I heard it said, when you're talking to somebody, and I was mentioning before about their arms folded, that can be a symbol. It's not always the case, because sometimes it's people's comfort places where they're leaning back with their arms folded. But sometimes it could be an indication of them closed-minded, closed-spirited, right? So
Yeah.
a technique that I heard recently is you give them something, so it makes them unfold and grab the stuff, and now it's a way to get them to unfold and open up.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Okay, question number 2. What role does body language play in conveying messages and emotions in our interaction? Let's put that to Tanya. Tanya, how say you?
You know what? I think that's a great question. I think it plays a big role. I talk a lot of times with people about communication. From a mental health perspective, we talk about passive aggressive communication, and assertive. And all of that takes on different postures, it takes on different tones and attitudes, right? Someone who is more passive aggressive in their communication style, if they have difficulties resolving conflict, they often tend to, that they're mad about something, but they won't come out and say it. So you feel it. They may slam the door. They may put the bowl down really harshly on the table. When you go and ask them, is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. Why would you think something is wrong? But you're clearly seeing that something is disturbing them, but they're not coming out and saying it. Someone who has more of a aggressive style of communication, sometimes it's the yelling, sometimes it can be physical, right? It depends on what's going on with the individual. And oftentimes assertiveness is where most of us want to fall, which is where we can clearly and effectively say how we feel and what we think in a peaceful manner. And the other person will be able to hear us and hopefully respond in turn the same way. So I think when we think about body language, again, I think it's a complex thing. Like I was saying a little while ago, I think there's certain body language. For us to say that it doesn't mean anything, I think would be really just not being living in reality. I mean, even now we're living in times where people will say, if you see something suspicious, just call the police. And
Yes.
people call just because of the way somebody's dressed or the way that they had their jacket or the way that they grimaced in their face, right? So I think body language is really important, and picking up on body language. I also believe this to be cultural as well. If you go to certain places and certain areas, they're going to have a different body language, right? They even communicate differently. As a
Mhm.
social worker, when I would go out, I did CPS work. And when we would go out to different communities, one of the things that we always did, we learned to do, was to always greet the people in the neighborhood, because those people knew that we were not from there. And oftentimes we were not welcome in those communities. So coming with a stance of humility, like, hey, we don't want any problems. We're here to just see about a kid, because we had to park the car. We didn't want any problems coming in and out of these buildings and things of that nature. And people were able to pick up on our body language that we didn't mean them any harm. We weren't here to investigate anything else. We're just really here to see about a child. So
Right.
I think body language sends a message to those who are looking. And I think it goes back to the audience and really paying attention and having self-awareness is, what is it that you're trying to convey to other people when you show up and when you show up in the room. I think a great thing that we can ask people, maybe, I'm sure maybe Steve would agree with this, is what presence do we carry when
Mhm.
we're around people? What do people really get from us when we're around? I ask people that sometimes. What do you pick up from me? I ask clients that, because I would surely hate that I'm thinking I'm coming across as genuine and authentic and caring and concerning, and someone finds me to be cold and callous. Now, if I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over again, it probably would be wise for me to check this out, to say, well, if I've heard this about 7 times in my life, perhaps it's something that's worth me investigating. So I think body language is really important.
So
Quincy,
then, Tanya, okay, would you agree then that a person can speak without opening their mouth?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I believe that. And just going back to what I was saying about even in the times that we're living in, unfortunately now, sometimes people don't have to say anything to you, but don't go on that side of the street. Don't walk, maybe it's time to make that phone call. I mean, that may be a bit extreme, but that's just to tell you how we can pick up on something that seems awry. So if we can pick up on that in the community, far less the people that we interact with much more closely, where we're able to see them. So I think that people can definitely pick up messages based off of the body language that you're giving off, for sure. And because I think, what is the statistic, 90% of communication is within your body language, and 10% is verbal. I think we ought to pay more attention again to what is our presence. What is our presence giving off to people that we are familiar with and people that we are not familiar with? I think we need to find out both.
Someone was about to weigh in when I stepped on.
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to say something that it can certainly wait. It's not important.
Anyone else? Okay, question number 2. What role does body language play in conveying messages and emotions in our interaction? Dr. Phil, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yes, Bishop. I think this is a high point, because I think this is one of the areas that most people don't pay attention to, right? Their body language. And for the most part, their goal could be one thing, but their body and their facial expression is saying something else, right? Like, I really want to do a good job. And they're shaking, they're acting kind of nervous. And you're like, yeah, but you don't your body is saying something else, right? And we're most of the time we're looking and feeling what somebody is saying, especially if it's a one-on-one. You have nowhere else to place your eyes but in front of you to the person that's trying to talk to you. So
Yeah.
you're looking at everything that they're doing. If they have nervous expressions like, and or the lip like this, right? All of that is coming across as, well, this person doesn't seem interested, but they're saying, no, I am interested. Okay, just their facial expression says, well, I'm not feeling that, based on how your body is acting, right? Or if somebody's coming to you and they're clenched fists, like their whole body is saying, I'm tense, I'm uncomfortable, and I don't like what's being said, I don't like what's being done. This gesture, like just putting your hand in front of you like this, in general interpretation of that means stop.
Yeah.
Right? It means don't come any further. You're in my space, right? When somebody puts their hand in front of them, it's a general meaning of you're too close,
Yeah.
right? And even the folding of the arms is a defense mechanism, right? So when somebody does like this, it could be you're too close.
Yeah.
And they're not comfortable with people being in their space so close. So normally when I see people do this, I take one step back and I see them put their hands down, because it's almost like they're, especially if it's somebody that's been through some abusive relationships or been in tough situations like that, it becomes where they feel they need to put a guard up between you and them.
Yeah.
Right. So you all of these are like, when I see somebody clench up or their shoulders get stiff when I'm talking to them, or if you go to give them a hug and they go like this, just know their space is being somewhat, they feel like their space is being somewhat violated. So, reading people's body language, reading their facial expressions, there's certain general things that tell you that either what you've said is offensive and is not coming across the way you want it to, or, yes, it's coming across and they're very excited, and you're doing well with that.
Can I say something here?
Mhm.
I think people have to be conscious of the way that they are projecting. For example, I was in a band, 8-piece band. It was a knockoff of Chicago, and I played bass, and I would go on the edge of the stage and I would just sit and play, concentrated, right? I'd come off the stage and people would say, "What's going on with you? You pissed off?" And I would say, "No. Why? You seem so angry." I said, "No, I'm just concentrating." It was disconnected. The way I was projecting myself was completely different from what was going on inside of me. And I learned a big lesson there. So I don't know if anybody's ever had that situation where you get misunderstood by somebody, and then they say, "Oh, that's the way you are."
Mm.
They put that on you. It's interesting.
Then
That's it.
Of course, go ahead, Phil.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point, Frank, because even sometimes, I walk in a room and, to some people, I'm a really big person, right? So I walk in and somebody said I walk like, I walk like I own the place, kind of a walk, but I'm not aware that's the persona I'm giving. So I walk in and they think, wow, this person is here to take over, when I'm just like, I'm just here to pick up something. I'm just here to shop, right?
Yeah.
But it's just how people interpret and they brand you the moment they see you.
Sure.
Right. That's very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bishop.
Let me say something. Would you all agree with me that body language enhances and amplifies the verbal message being portrayed through hand signals, gestures, and postures?
I didn't quite understand the question.
No, I'm just making a statement. Would
Okay.
you agree that body language enhances, amplifies the verbal message being portrayed through
Oh, yes.
signals, gestures, and your posture?
Yes.
me,
Yeah,
It does amplify it.
absolutely.
It does amplify it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Okay, so a person could ask the question then, what does body language accomplish? What does body language accomplish? Well, it enhances, it amplifies the verbal message and portrays through hand signals, gestures, and a person's posture. And sometimes you can be talking to a person and they're not sitting up straight, they're just looking at you like that. You definitely know that they're not listening to you. So body language is definitely important. And by the way, all of you were reacting tonight. I can see you nodding your head and saying in your heart, amen. And that's exactly what I like, because let me say this, that we all communicate. Oh, yes, we do. We all definitely communicate, even when we are not speaking.
yes. You can learn a lot from watching The Voice, the show The Voice, because at any particular time, the coach will say to the person, I need you not to move around so much. This is a singing thing. If you're here to dance, it's something different. Or when you're singing, look out, see if you can touch people, because singing is about communicating emotionally to somebody else. It's for me, it's very interesting. I learn a lot from that alone.
And that is so important. Now, we really don't have time to go to question 3 because we only have 5 minutes, and that will be the time that we'd have to just give Steve alone and Frank, So let me put something to you. When we mentioned the word tone, as we were dealing with in question number 1, okay, what do we mean by tone, really? What do we really mean by tone?
Tone or own?
Tone, T-O.
Okay. Okay.
For me, tone is sound. It's again, when we're talking about conveying messages, I think it's the way that a message sounds. And I think it depending on the message that you're trying to give, I think we have to be mindful of what do you want the message to sound like. And there's been a few examples of that. If I'm communicating I love you to someone, typically that comes off as being a caring tone. I love you, I really care for you. As opposed to me saying it in a different way, and that might not be what you receive. I love you. That has a different tone and has a different, it's a sound. And I think messages, as we've been saying tonight, there's a few things that rest on messages. We need to know what is it that we're trying to communicate and what we want the message to sound like, who's the audience, and how we want them to receive it.
So then you concur with me that tone is very, very much important.
Absolutely.
Get the message across. Well, listen, we have said a lot tonight, Dr. Phil, and certainly we have heard a lot tonight. Then let me ask this general question. What should we take away from tonight's conversation? Or what are you expecting the people to take away from tonight's conversation? Let's put that first of all to Minister Tanya Wagner. What are you expecting the people tonight, woman of God, to take away from tonight's conversation?
I would expect people to take away tonight that we should strategize when it comes to communication, healthy communication. There's different forms. If you want to communicate with people effectively and you want it to be healthy, I think we need to learn different methods and strategies. I think the biggest takeaway for me tonight is, do you care about the audience? And the audience can be one person or it can be 1,000 people. What is it that you're trying to achieve in that communication? And are you taking the time to reflect to ensure that people are absolutely receiving that from you when they interact with you? Those are the biggest takeaways.
That's important. Okay, let's hear from the master connector himself. So what should we take away from tonight's conversation?
I just want to just go on the tone here. The great oracle Google says your tone of voice is the manner in which you speak to someone, not just your words, along with nonverbal cues like body language, eye contact. Tone of voice is an essential element of communication that often speaks more powerfully than your actual words ever could. So that's the great oracle Google. But anyway, I think, there's been a lot of great takeaways, but the big one for me is the importance of connecting when you communicate. And there's many ways in which you can: verbal, body language, all these, the heart posture, all these things are important in terms of communication, but truly, truly connecting.
Truly, truly connect. Okay, let's hear it this time from Frank. What should we take away, Frank, from tonight's conversation? You're muted, Frank. You're muted.
I said that's such an interesting question. Personally, what I'm taking away is the warmth of this group. And really, and everybody comes here with their own background or whatever, and we're all in a soup. In Italian, they call it a jambot, a big bunch of soups. And we're just talking about something that's of interest so that we can go out and step into who we are and bring that to people and allow them to be gifted by, this sounds odd, but gifted by our presence to help them, have them come out to be better than they think they are. And I that's what I'm getting from all of you.
Thank you indeed, sir. Thank you much. Okay, last but not least, let's hear from the originator, Dr. Phil.
What I would love people to walk away with is listen and care about the moment. Life is about the moments. It's not just about it's not a general statement. It's in that moment. So pay attention to when you're in a conversation or you have to say something, because it does affect somebody else.
Pay attention. It does affect somebody else. Okay. Well, listen, this is Bishop Scott saying thank you to Tanya for coming on tonight. Thank God for Steve, the master connector. Thank God for Frank Coppola, who we have met before, and certainly, sir, it's a pleasure to see you again. Last but not least, we want to thank God for the visionary of the Bishop's Corner, Dr. Phil himself. Listen, this is Bishop Scott saying thank you very, very much for weighing in tonight, and by all means, see you next week, same time. God bless. Bye-bye now.